Listen, did the No Kings protest fix anything? No, it didn't. It didn't because the government is still as it was yesterday. We still have tyranny, right? So it didn't change that, but that doesn't mean that it's a waste. It's actually important and critical because we seem to compare ourselves to campaigns abroad. However, the United States of America, so us as Americans, have never had a unifying characteristic. Yes, you can say we all live in the United States, but traditionally, American tends to exclude a lot of people, right? If you're Hispanic, you get treated as non-citizen first before you're a citizen. If you're black, you're treated as a criminal first before you are treated as someone who may be innocent, right? This is a recognition in which, where in South Korea, the police and the military saw these protesters and they were like, hey, they look just like me. They are my people. Here, even if it is Hispanic or black, agents or police, they see whiteness as their people, right? So ultimately, their maximization of harm is done against black and brown bodies, right? And we have to recognize that in order to have a successful resistance, we have to have a unifying identity. And I think that's what these protests are good for, a unifying identity of people who may not look like you, but believe in the same constitutional principles and guarantees that we had ratified into a union for, right? And this means that we have people who are as willing to rise up against this regime, right? And that's the important thing. Because without that energy of not feeling alone, then you will be pessimistic and not want to resist. Yes, the No Killings protest didn't demand anything that was actually going to disrupt this system, right? But ultimately, what it did do was tell you that you were not alone, especially if you're from a rural area, from a red state, right? It tells you that you have a community to lean on. And that ultimately funnels us the gas when we do not have any more to go. Because I was exhausted yesterday because I'm like, how is this going to fix what we have when it's not a thing in which it demands anything that can actually disrupt that, right? But then I told myself, and I'm like, these are the people who will be forced to rise up to what's happening. These are the people who will need to understand that this is much more serious than we deem it to be. These are the people who have to recognize that what we did today, while great for community, isn't the actual response that's going to collapse what we have, right? And that means that if we, the people, do not have that power to disrupt it under protest, and if the federal government, the branches, are no longer useful because we have no functioning federal government, then what actor has that power to maximize against the federal? That is the state. That's what I've been, even in my primary account, which is now banned, I've been funneling that we need to leverage the state in order to force the federal government. That also includes ending federal funding. That is one of the most critical things. We're going through like some soft secession where we have like healthcare alliances, regional, right? That's an example of it. But we need to recognize that if we do not deem ourselves to be that solution, and if we want to hold back on whatever maximum solution there is from the people, because optics can position that that is a certain, thing, then if you don't want to do the bloodshed, as in yourself, then it has to be led by the state. And you cannot use excuses for your state governor if you're on a blue state that they cannot do it because they don't have any power. Because then you're saying that you don't have any power because as the people, what do? We walked and it didn't change anything. At least when it comes to government, right? And I'm not saying it was useless, that it was a waste. It wasn't. I just said that it wasn't, right? But it means we have to be clear about what can fix and what Federalist 28 positions is what. Power being almost always the rival of power, the federal government will at times stand ready to check the usurpations of the state governments, and the state governments will have the same deposition towards the federal government. The people, by throwing themselves into either side, so choosing which side is actually going against their constitutional liberties, will make it much more successful. If their rights are invaded by either, they can make use of the other as the instrument to redress. So the thing is that we should not be maximizing on resistance without a state commander-in-chief. And our flaw is that we do not have a state commander-in-chief, but we have a state press secretary, which are governors who say all the right things on social media, even in interviews, but their actions say differently because then they say in the state police or they allow for the local police to beat up the protesters, right? That is an agent of tyranny. But in us understanding that we have to demand more from our states because that is the only vehicle towards collapsing this, that is a success.